Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first event, co-hosted by the Kite Centre and Immunity Group Australia. I would like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land where we are gathering today, the Kaimanagal people and their elders, past, present, and future emerging leaders. My name is Nina. I'm a food allergy mom, a journalist, a storyteller. You will hear a lot of stories today. There won't be my stories, there'll be stories of other food allergy families, but also from international experts such as Dr. Douglas Jones from the United States of America, Rosemary Ivanovic, senior psychologist from Canberra, Mike Young, who is a compounding pharmacist and proprietor of Synergy Compounding Pharmacy in Sydney. You will also hear from Dr. Julian Botulevich. He is one of the, I call, heroes of regional Australia. You will also see a video and a success story by one of our Australian regional families who relocated to the United States and successfully completed a particular program. And you will also hear from Sanela Shinikovic from Melbourne. She's in the process of registering her NGO and is a great advocate for her daughters and for her family and for every other family with food allergies, with asthma and related conditions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Julian Botulevich. He's been doctor for over 30 years.
So welcome to the Kite Centre. I'm the clinical director of this institution, which has only been open for a couple of years. The centre is an acronym, called the name of the centre, KITE, with the letter standing for kids, integrated, small m, understood, medical. But then therapy, because therapy comes from an inordinate number of sources. Doctors don't have some kind of wholesale hold on it. And then increasingly, I think, something that is becoming part of good healthcare, which is education. And that's not just education of practitioners, it's the education of individuals who are there to be receiving interventions, to make decisions as to whether those interventions are in fact in their own interests and ours. So here's my title, is an animal and a flower, which happen to be the flora and fauna symbol of an Australian state. Can anyone tell me which state? I made that for you, lady from Queensland. And the Cooktown Orchid, yes, it's Queensland. And so whilst we're in that general part of the world, there's a little more musing here. This from the United States, anyone? I don't know whether Dr. Jones has joined us yet, but the elk and the sago lily, variously the faunal and floral emblem of the state of Utah. What I really want to talk about today are some of my learnings, I guess, or experiences from having been a paediatrician in New South Wales, Australia for over 30 years now. I know my looks belie that statement, but nevertheless it is the case that I've been a specialist for over 30 years, and I probably have to accept that I may be halfway through my career by now, as much as I might not like that. I've seen really big changes in two issues. One is the way healthcare is delivered in New South Wales since the 20th century, and secondly the pattern of illness in children since that time. Here's a photograph of one of my colleagues from the 1990s. It's a standard picture of a paediatrician from that time. They were heroes, basically. They trained in all aspects of paediatric care. They were generalists, they were holistic, they did everything that needed to be doing. They were, as you can see, mostly men, and whilst most of them did not wear their underpants on the outside, many did think it was quite funny to wear colourful socks or ties with Homer Simpson on the front. And we all reeked vaguely of that sweet, sour smell of, vomited breast milk, because that was part of our whole cachet. It was made worse, of course, by the fact that about this time, George Clooney decided to join our ranks as a television paediatrician on ER, and so there was an expectation that we somehow lived up to both his clinical and personal characteristics, which made our job particularly hard. But I think in the main, we did it. It became apparent as more and more information became available, and importantly the way information is shared, the internet, everything else, that there was an enormous amount of data which was being generated, which is starting to make a general paediatrician a slightly more complicated individual. To know everything about everything is difficult. To know something about lots of things is fine. But there was a trend that moved into a situation where you started to go and learn an awful lot about a smaller area of medicine. And this was very much the trend of the late 1990s and into the year 2000. And these people were often called staff specialists. They spent the latter part of their clinical training not necessarily doing research primarily, but becoming very, very good at certain clinical aspects of care and becoming expert in that, and then would hand that clinical expertise down to their apprentices. And so this is a photograph of someone working in newborn intensive care and putting a breathing tube into a tiny little baby. And that's a skill set that obviously needs to be learned, and then once learnt is a valuable skill set to be able to pass on. Not everybody wants to work on Christmas and Easter and all night long doing intensive care like that. And again, with the advent of more and more data, a new kind of specialist came along, someone called the super specialist. They were quite hard to reach in some ways. They had become now not so much clinically expert, although they were. What they actually did have that added to their bow was that they were, from a research point of view, highly trained. They would often spend the second half of their training doing a PhD and becoming a very expert individual in a very, very tiny area of care. These people often had a first name that was Professor. They all seemed to be professors. And their clinical involvement was tempered by the fact that a large part of their job was to also attend conferences and to speak at conferences and to try and gain competitive grant money, which is not always easy and hard work, in order to build their research laboratories and to, in a sense, start to give them some publicity in the public sector. It meant in some ways that the more successful you were at being a super specialist, the fewer patients you could care for because you were too busy doing research to actually be caring for anybody. And so I think the beginning of a rather large chasm started to develop now. And it was filled with this wonderful PC concept of multidisciplinary team. We had numerous people, each with a fairly specific job description, who knew exactly what they were doing, but sometimes weren't necessarily sure how they related to the other person, etc., etc. And I found this off the New South Wales Health site. I love it because you can see an awful lot of hands, but there's not a single recognisable face in this mix. And presumably the face that's hidden behind all those hands is a super specialist that's currently handing out to you advice about what you should be doing in your current clinical setting, although you have to make your way through this maze to get there. So I perceive complex layers of caregivers with very distinct lines of responsibility between and to each other and to the patients. I see complete inequity in services when it comes to rural centres versus urban ones and different states with different issues. And more importantly, this fairly rigid and inflexible system of delivery of care has now become the standard of care, when in fact there are huge changes in the kinds of illnesses and problems that our kids are facing now compared to, say, 30 years ago. 30 years ago, infectious diseases, the problems of preterm birth, neonatal morbidity, these were all dreadful issues to be dealt with. Car accidents because of poor seatbelts and other restraining devices. But now, again, the internet, which in a sense brought so much information together, has also, I think, altered generation after generation of developing our minds. And without being able to quite put a finger on everything, there are now the big five. There are 5 conditions that affect at least 1 in 10 Australian children, which is a huge number. And each of them has a massive burden in both cost and morbidity on the community. And in no particular order: asthma, sleep disorders, neurodevelopmental issues such as ADHD and autistic spectrum disorder, childhood obesity, probably as a result of more time being spent on screens and less time spent active, and then finally food allergy, which is the major concern of today's meeting. Now, is there a relationship between these things? Almost certainly. It's probably not a single one entity. It's probably no more than a handful though. And although this is a paper from adult medicine published 4 years ago, this paper showed very nicely in a study out of Cambridge University in the UK that different people's level of being affected by allergen, in this case peanut, varied significantly depending on whether they've been stressed by either sleep deprivation or stressed by excessive exercise. So not sensible routine exercise, but in essence, various stresses on the system seem to change your ability to cope with, or in another word, mediate your ability to deal with inflammation. And so that, a night of sleeplessness, amazingly, will impact on your ability to cope with an inadvertent dose of peanut the following day. It's been sufficiently clear that the group of 5 that I spoke about are in some shape, way or form encapsulated then in how we're sleeping, how we're exercising, and what we're eating and how we're eating it and when we're eating it. And to that end, the 3 pillars of health have been a new concept, I guess, delivered by the Australian government. It's fewer pillars than we often get dealt with, so be thankful for that. It's often 7 or 8, and both Trent Zimmerman, who's left Parliament now, and Mike Friedlander, who's the paediatrician that remains, were both really big drivers in putting together some really good thoughts and really good advice about how we could be assisting our children in going forward. And of course, in every strategy that you have for treatment of any condition, there has to be both a prevention strategy and where you've got affected individuals, an intervention strategy. So, not so long ago, again, 2017, a really effective prevention strategy was put together by a handful of those super specialists, and yet they represent, and those names are all pretty much on the one page, they represent the number of individuals who are heavily involved in this research in Australia. They put together an Australian consensus on infant feeding because there'd been uncertainty about it, there'd probably been errors in the way it had been done, but in essence what we should be doing is exposing most infants to the important allergens in the first 12 months of life, starting sometime between 4 and 6 months. You can be arbitrary about this. And this has been wildly promulgated. But sadly it is not in your blue book. I don't know what colour it is in.
Red.
It's red, okay. But to me, this is just such an important thing to be informing families about, that it shouldn't just be shared with the medical profession, it should actually be these recommendations in bold print in people's baby books going forward, so that you know that one of the things that you can do to assist or alleviate prevention, food allergy, is to expose your children to pretty much everything but raw egg before the age of 12 months. There's another kind of prevention, I suppose, and some of you might be aware of this book, mothers seem to be, but I found this on the website of the Allergen Bureau. I wasn't sure if they're going to arrest me or find me or chase me, but it seems to be a name of a group of people who are well intended to manage allergen issues. And I was pleased and surprised to see that, along with providing peer-reviewed data, I don't know that this was peer-reviewed, I don't know whether the Nigella Jones or Mr. Ramsey have been given an opportunity to try these recipes, but nevertheless, people whose first name's a professor have come together to make a cookbook, which they assure you will assist you in being able to help families take control in the kitchen and maintain a healthy, diverse, balanced diet that is nutritionally adequate despite having to avoid certain allergens. So this is very much in the prevention and avoidance camp. And this book was advertised for the first time, as best I can make out, on the 1st of May 2023 with a recommended retail price of $40. Well, I don't think it's racing off the shelves because I yesterday could find it online for $25. So perhaps it is a start, or it is a facet of management, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily going to be that successful. I think what people really want to explore when something has become just so widespread is an intervention, a treatment, a therapy. And so to that end, again, looking at Australian data, I'm just trying to keep myself very local. Other people can speak about their own experiences. An important study published in one of the most prestigious British journals, The Lancet, in 2022, spoke about the use of oral immunotherapy in a group of Australian children with peanut allergy. And the findings, I have taken these verbatim from the abstract, and abstract, for those that aren't aware, is just a very super concise abbreviation of what actually runs through the whole paper. So I haven't drilled down in depth on the whole paper, but this is exciting and important data, because what it says, they took three groups of children, some that received some probiotic with antigen, the peanut, some that received just peanut, and then a group who were the controls. They were blinded, they were not aware of which group that they were put in. And the exciting news was that the children that had received peanut with or without the probiotic achieved sustained unresponsiveness, which is a rather long phase for cured of food allergy, as best as the authors of this study could maintain. They didn't talk about children that were able to sustain or deal with larger doses of allergen without unfortunate events, because I suppose this is the holy grail, to be cured of whatever it is that ails you. And importantly, the statistics they use, there's an old saying in medicine that if you torture the data sufficiently, it will confess. And it's often the case that a doctor or a group will try and find a way of being able to present their data so it looks exciting, but really it's not very. And in more recent years, this concept of what are called confidence intervals, which is I can confidently tell you, and you can see listed here confidence intervals of CI 27 to 53. That translates and it says 95%. And so that's plain speaking statistics at last. And that says, I can assure you that the data suggests that there is a 95% chance, if you have our treatment, that you will be 27 to 53 times more likely to recover from your condition than if you don't have treatment. All right? For all that, a position paper by the same group, which included all the authors of that paper, accepted that this paper and others taken together indicate that OIT is effective in inducing desensitisation. But they choose still not to routinely recommend it because of concerns that they have about patients' important outcomes. That was my previous slide, and as I say, it's clear, 25, 27 to 53 times higher likelihood of achieving remission, cure, if you take the treatment rather than you don't. Now, they also mention in the next paragraph down that there were treatment-related side effects. And that looks pretty scary, 90% up there in the group of PPIT children, 88% in the other. And there is no doubt that is high and that is significant. But if you look at the control group, and this is very important, the group that were purposely not being given any allergen by the investigators, they nevertheless had a background adverse reaction rate of 72% simply by participating in the normal activities of daily life. So in the kids who weren't,
Do you remember what the actual reported adverse reactions were?
They reported everything from urticaria through most were gastrointestinal discomfort or skin, but they chose to make everything they did not just choose EpiPen or non-EpiPen related events, but any subjective expression of discomfort was recorded. But I do think that if you look at the fact that we're coming off a base of 72% having an adverse reaction, suddenly 88 and 92, whilst they look concerning, they don't look as desperately unhappy as they do about the fact that just by going through your daily business, you have a 75% likelihood chance of having something come along in your day-to-day attempt to avoid these allergens than if you actually took them on and tried to desensitise. So the position paper that came out this year, just last month, in relation to this and other studies, look, I think it's terribly disappointing, if not problematic. And I also wonder whether it's ethically robust, because in a sense, having shown so much good evidence for current therapies to be effective, to reach out and say that we feel that we need to spend a bit more time looking around for something that could be a little bit safer, a little bit more effective. I must say I'm very much minded of the argument around global warming, that in a sense we kept investigating the problem rather than intervening with the issue, when it was as clear as can be to some people 60, 70 years ago that there was a problem that needed to be addressed then, and now we're looking at points of no return for certain species and certain structures and perhaps certain civilisations and cultures. So I think it's fantastic to keep asking for more money to do more research to find out a better way of treating or managing a situation. But I think when you've got clear evidence that there is an intervention that is effective and available, that it should be shared with consumers in an honest, open and robust fashion. The other thing that concerned me about that study and everything about it is that it enrolled a total of 120 children over a 4-year period. Now that's 30 children per annum, and in a country the size of Australia with the problem we have here, that's just a drop in the bucket. So finally, that ASCII statement stands for the Society of Clinical Immunologists and Allergists of Australia, made some key recommendations which I think are internally both concerning and inconsistent. I think this notion that food OIT should only be administered by a clinical immunologist, allergist, of whom there are only a handful. The likelihood of seeing one in person probably would require years and years of waiting. They then go on to say when food OIT is provided through a clinical trial, that you've got this wonderful supportive relationship because the specialist plays a critical role. Yes, they do. There's no two ways about it. Somebody has to have a hands-on. Sorry, I had an overview of this, but remember we talked about the multidisciplinary team. It doesn't seem to me that the finger that's next direct to the patient needs necessarily to be that of immunologist, allergist, and I could imagine that this whole process could be effectively provided. And then the caveat at the end, which is that regardless of whether you're being treated within a study or for OIT, nevertheless, the likelihood of allergic reactions, including anaphylaxis, remains, and you will still have a risk of allergic reactions whether or not you're undertaking OIT. I think the challenge then is to say, or push back and say, well, if my risk remains, but my likelihood or possibility of cure is 22 to 50, or 27 to 50 odd times higher, share with me the downside of not exploring OIT. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a fascinating overview of the current state of affairs in Australia. I will stop this share and invite Mike Yank from Synergy Compounding Pharmacy and Integrated Health Clinic. Mike has a lot of experience with medical allergies as well, in terms of preparing compounding medication for patients with special needs of all kinds. So I will let Mike take control of this place.
My name is Mike. I am a pharmacist, a compounding pharmacist, and I'm the owner of Synergy Compounding Pharmacy in Crow's Nest. I am passionate about being a pharmacist. I love being a pharmacist. I love providing primary health care for patients and families that is in need. I am also a father of 2 very naughty children, but they're very lovely and they are very lovable at times. So I understand being a father, and when you have kids that require treatment, it's really stressful. So for all the mothers out there, you're doing a good job, and you are being looked after by people that can help. You just have to reach out and look for them. Thanks, Dr. Julian. That was a really insightful view about the pediatric and immunology community, and really appreciate your opinion on this issue. So I graduated in New Zealand. It's a little town called, well, it's not little, it's a little town called Dunedin, and it's the University of Otago. Graduated about 16 years ago. I've been a pharmacist for 16 years, and I've been doing compounding for about 10. And you may ask yourself, what is compounding? Compounding is, I wrote this down, I thought it was really cool. So it is the art and science responsible for the creation of customized medication. So you use compounded medications and preparations can be created by combining individual ingredients with the exact strength and dosage form that's required by the patient. So compounding hasn't been, compounding has been around for a very long time. You probably back in the days you think, this chemist is, crushing up tablets in the bag and making creams on the bench using a slab and a mold, and it's that secret formula that it's gonna fix everything. That super cream is gonna get rid of the eczema. That I gotta use that cream and never get infected. So that was the secret formula. So there we go. Compounding's been for a long time. But now it's all changed. Compounding is much more sophisticated. It's much more controlled. But how has it changed? So we rarely crush tablets anymore. We source raw ingredients from TGA and GMP suppliers that's accredited by the government. So they go through vigorous accreditation processes, and they look at ingredient that tests for excipients as well as contaminants. So, and as a compounding pharmacy, we need to source ingredients through these suppliers, and so that we can create medication or preparation that is as pure as possible. And why is that important? It's important because, as I said, 10% of the kids these days have some forms of allergy to things, and it's not fun being a pediatrician or an immunologist. It's really hard, really figuring out what they're allergic to or what sort of excipient. So I'm glad I'm not in your shoes. But we can help to sort of create formulas and preparations that we can remove these allergens for kids. How we've also evolved as a compounding is that we are using specialty equipment that is very fine-tuned. For example, we've got digital scales that can measure up to 3 decimal places. So when you're looking at microgram doses, when you're looking at 0.05% of a cream or a solution, we can create those to that very, very fine details. We have mixers that can spin up to 2,500 RPMs that really homogenizes the creams or solutions or suspensions for people. And compounding programs that can safeguard all the measuring steps or the mixing steps and then the final product. And powder containment fluids that keeps the technicians nice and safe, so they don't grow a third arm by exposing themselves to other chemicals, and also prevents spillages as well. So it's a really really sort of involved process with compounding nowadays. And also dosage containers. I guess back in the day you might just put creams into a jar, but then you question yourself, how do I get the exact dose out? So these containers are also being improved. We started using bottles with bottle stoppers and attachment syringes where you can measure, hey, let's do 1 drop of that, or let's do half a ml of that, or let's do 3 ml of something. So everything can be measured and verified. So these are the containers that are syringes that is FDA as well as TGA approved containers where they can be quantified. So they all go through testings and everything. And also now accreditation courses for pharmacists and technicians are actually available too. You can go and set a course, you can do the exam, it take about 3 months, and then they'll teach you all the basic skills in learning these abilities to compound, to formulate, and then you come out with a certificate. However, the most important thing is to experience. You need to use these skills on hand to produce products that is up to scratch, really. So you might ask, why is there a need for a compounding pharmacist? There's a couple of reasons. First of all, is again, we're looking at allergies. With globalization of commercial products, things are normally made from one place, and the logistic distribution from one place, it can go through the world, obviously. So, and again, commercialization of pharmaceuticals, then what that means is they produce things in bulk. So they will use excipients that may be suitable for majority of the people, but it could be 20% or 10% of people that can't take these things. Therefore, this is where we come in. We can remove allergens or remove, say, sweetener that is not necessary in there, or preservative in cream that people can be allergic to. So that's where we come. We can make these things and then give to the people that is needed. And the dosage and the strength of a medication, we can also adjust. For example, let's look at say melatonin, right? So for kids and for really young kids that need melatonin, I think 2 milligram might be too much. It can start with 0.5 milligram. So you can't really crush a tablet and mix it in something to give to the kids. That's, I guess, not very accurate either. So what we do, we can make, for example, melatonin into liquids. Then you give them as drop-wise, or you give them as a required volume to give them the exact dose. And the dosage forms. Dosage form meaning like either creams or tablets or pessaries, that we can also play around with, that we can modify it to suit its purpose. I guess, again, we take melatonin as an example. For example, for kids that can have sleep issues, they may have no trouble falling asleep, but they do have trouble staying asleep. Then how do you deal with that? I mean, kids cannot swallow tablets where they can make melatonin into slow release formulations. However, we can make melatonin cream they can apply on the skin, and will act like a slow release melatonin throughout the night. So these are fun formulas we can create. But obviously, these formulas is not just an off-base idea, but what we also do is we also gather evidence that supports the use of these formulas, so that we're keeping the patient safe and we're keeping everything as evidence-based as we can. What else is there? Like also, with always the treat of the patient who have tried everything and it hasn't worked. So this is where the most of the work comes in, actually. So we work with a lot of specialists that they'll be like, oh, hey, Mike, I've read this treatment on a study. Can you reproduce this? And I'll be like, oh, possible. Why don't you send it through? So then we'll decipher or have a read through what the study is about and trying to collect other evidence that have supported that sort of treatment. And then we'll be like, okay, let's see if we can get those ingredients in and recreate the formula to reflect what the study had been used. And we present to the specialist that has requested this and give the other information about what sort of side effects you should expect, what sort of outcome you should expect, and obviously the cost as well. And yeah, this is the fun thing that's tried everything. Sometimes it can be antibiotics, sometimes it can be gastrointestinal issues or other sleep issues as well. It can be all tried everything. There's a lot of tried everything cases that we can try to fix. And medication shortages. I'm sure most people are having trouble getting antibiotics at the moment. I've been compounding for 10 years, and I never really had to compound, say, amoxicillin or cephalexin antibiotics. But I've been doing that for the last, I think a number of times over the last few months. There's just so much shortages at the moment. It's crazy. And it's actually scary to see these shortages because these are everyday essential medications. I'm not sure why we couldn't produce ourselves. And they're expensive. When people come to compounding, it's expensive, and that really highlights the issue at the moment. I think that's something that we can definitely work on. So what do I do every day when I get to work? I check all the emails that there's a lot of inquiries about, oh, hey, is this possible? Can you do this? Can you do that? So then we will do our research and we'll formulate and provide information. So being a compounding pharmacist is really fun. It's actually very involved. It's not just about getting the script, typing it up, and put a sticker on it. It's actually going, oh, hey, Trish, how are you doing? Why is this not working? Or what do you want to achieve? And how do you want to use this, this medication? So you become so involved in their treatment that it's really fun, and you create this relationship. And I guess that's what I love about being a pharmacist too. Well, and that's why I kind of work hard to become a compounding pharmacist, is so that you can create this relationship with your customers, and hopefully working with specialists that's open-minded, that they can sort of look outside the square, and obviously still supported by evidence and the knowledge and experience to create a better environment for the patients. So, how do you get access to a compounding pharmacy? Well, it's not difficult, nor is it full privilege. Like anyone can request something, or they just need to find a doctor that is willing to collaborate freely, to talk more about, hey Mike, do you have any ideas on what to do here? Or they've tried this and this and that, and I've seen this on paper. Again, it's just a equal ground collaboration. It's really good and open. They need to be open-minded to have opinions. So, I mean, as a compounding pharmacy, you really need to do the groundwork, and you really need to have an open communication and do your research to provide these formulas and evidence in terms of supporting this sort of treatment plan. I guess our dedication is it's the patient's health, safety, and well-being, and we need to, as pharmacists, need to re-educate ourselves and to gain more knowledge in terms of how we can serve the community better. And yeah, it's just a dedication as a pharmacist, dedication to compounding pharmacists, and the more we can educate ourselves, the better we can serve the community. I guess, yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Mike, for serving our community, and thank you again to Dr. Julian for a wonderful presentation. Now we're going to have our lovely friend, Rosemary Jovanovic from Canberra, joining us. She's a senior psychologist with more than 20 years of experience.
Let's see. So thanks again very much. So basically, what I wanted to talk about a little bit now is just pretty much the strong evidence that exists between the allergies and anxiety, allergies and stress. So I'm assuming that sort of people are aware of this, and from what I could hear from the previous presenters, is that there's an understanding of all those sort of psychosocial factors that can affect, I suppose, the incidence or how strongly young people experience allergies. Basically, there is a strong link, and research shows that there's a strong link between stress, anxiety, and allergies. So the evidence sort of shows that stress aggravates allergies, and anxiety can aggravate allergies. So it can actually cause an increase in allergies. It can, I suppose, heighten allergic reactions and allergy symptoms and allergy sensitivities. So it doesn't necessarily mean that obviously it doesn't cause an allergy, but it's a bi-directional relationship. So we know that that allergies can also lead to increased anxiety. So, and the reason behind this is actually quite interesting because it's a similar sort of, I suppose, neurotransmitters that are released by an anxiety attack and an allergy episode, so an allergic reaction. So we know that cortisol is released when we are very stressed. We know that it's also released when when we're experiencing anxiety, but it's also one of the chemicals or one of the neurotransmitters that are released during an allergic episode. Other, I suppose other chemicals that sort of underpin anxiety episodes also are similar sort of ones that occur in an allergic response. So at this stage, I think that there's a lot of research. It's a growing area of research where people are looking at what's happening between allergies and anxiety and psychosocial well-being. So as was alluded previously, we know that sleep, all sorts of factors can affect the incidence and the severity of the presentation. And these are also things that affect the presentation of anxiety and stress. So anxiety is one of the most somatic, I suppose, presentations in mental health. So we feel anxiety in our body a lot, and sometimes there can be confusion between what's causing our anxiety, and certainly symptoms such as tightness in the chest and tightness in the throat and difficulty breathing can go across other can be similar symptoms in allergic responses. It can also be similar symptoms to things like heart attack and things like that. So people sometimes have difficulty in separating these very strong, salient, somatic experiences of anxiety. So I think that what I want to say in my short presentation here is that management of anxiety and stress is essential in any allergy treatment plan. So you must consider that, okay, there's a likelihood that your young person will experience anxiety. If they're already experiencing anxiety, it's likely that this will bring on is sort of, I suppose, increased severity or, allergic reactions. So it's a crucial part of any plan, I would suggest. And I suppose in understanding the anxiety of a young person, I'm talking possibly between just more about presentation in young people, is that we have to kind of work out exactly what type of anxiety it is. So to have a proper assessment of your young person to see, whether it's generalized anxiety, whether it's specific separation anxiety, which are all the types of anxieties that can present. If it's social anxiety, and social anxiety is a big component in that young people with anxieties, because they can get quite concerned about how they appear. They can get quite concerned in how they're interacting with peers or, with other students, and that worries them a lot. So their perception of how they present or how they're seen because of their anxiety can, because of their allergy, can really influence and increase an incidence of social anxiety. So again, an important component, but also we also know that there is some comorbidity or, I suppose, correlation between not just allergies, anxiety, but also there's a connection that some emerging research is showing between allergies and even ADHD and ASD as well. So I always think it's quite crucial to have a proper comprehensive assessment of what's happening with a young person in that social emotional space, but even in the physical space. So my recommendations are often that you consider having some kind of sensory profile assessment, which can be conducted by an OT to see, to what extent there is, sort of sensitivity, not just to the allergy, but to other things like noises, to, sort of busy places, those situations that can be, sort of really impact their sensory, heighten their sensory awareness and really affect their, as I said, their stress and anxiety at the time. So proper assessment, including that mental health assessment, but also, as I said, more of the sensory assessment as well. And then what to do with that. It isn't, I think, in anxiety with young people, in allergies with young people. I think the onus is on parent well-being. So it's actually crucial. So we know that, parents of children that have allergies, food allergies or allergies, can experience induced or significant anxiety as well. So, and it's again a bit of a catch-22 because the anxiety levels and the stress levels of the parent directly affect and influence the way that the young people, sort of can adjust to living with a food allergy, but just in their overall presentation. So in young people, parents with children that have allergies that are young, it's actually quite crucial that they consider their well-being and how they're modelling coping as an important part of the family experience. So it's important that I think that parents consider what are their triggers. They have some good insight into their own ability to manage, or just their own how often they do get stressed, what their levels of stress are, what's causing their stress, and that they again model really good self-awareness and good self-care. So it's most crucial, I think, is that parents practice really overtly how they model how they take care of themselves. And there's so much information available around that. I think it's again important that that they have good knowledge in what's how the I suppose the allergy is presenting, good knowledge about themselves, and have foster emotional literacy in the family, and they're able to speak about feelings and how we cope with feelings. Really importantly too is that there's always going to be some anxiety, and anxiety isn't all bad. In actual fact, I think scales show that most people that present some kind of medical condition, and definitely allergies, will always have a level of anxiety. And it's rare, if on a scale say 1 to 10, that we would see that people have experiencing no anxiety at all. So to look at normalizing a level of 2 or 3 out of 10 in anxiety levels is what needs to happen. And then finding a way to work with that anxiety. So it's normal to be a bit stressed, it's normal to be a little bit worried, but ensuring that there's practices in the family where it's specifically addressed. And again, I think, as was mentioned before, sleep is crucial. So young people that experience anxiety and food allergies are often far more tired. They experience more fatigue. So creating those spaces for rest is crucial. Making sure that there's really good sleep hygiene is crucial. Having some opportunity again to really identify what's happening, some insight into what the feelings are at the time is quite crucial. And again, that comes back to the parents, having good awareness of this and modelling good self-care. So thank you. It's a little bit short, my presentation here today, but I really would welcome any questions. I'm assuming that's happening at the end, and I apologise. It's been a little bit of an erratic presentation because, again, sort of the technology has probably not come to the party for me completely today. But thank you, and over from me.
Thank you, Rosie, and thank you for taking the time from school day as well, from your school today. So the next, we will actually show you a video. So the next story is a video of a family from regional New South Wales. So we would like to thank the Asthma family for having us in their home today to talk about their experience with OIP treatment in America. How did it all start for you?
Well, I'd sort of heard about it through Facebook allergy groups. Made quite a few friends over Facebook Messenger with families that were already in America doing OIT with Dr. Jones, and from there it just sort of snowballed, and it was sort of an idea, but then we told our family, and Mark's parents and my parents fully supported us. We did some fundraising, lots of fundraising. It was a big effort, family, community, because obviously it's quite a big thing to relocate to Utah, which we knew we'd have to do this treatment. And it just sort of started from there, I guess.
Thank you. Mark, how was for you when you found out? How did it feel to have the glimpse of hope as a food allergy parent, that there could be a solution? What was your first thought or reaction?
I think when the journey that we've been on from the start, when we had our first reaction with Jack, I was at a mine site. I got a phone call from Holly, which said that she was going to hospital with Jack.
How long was he at the time?
About 16 months.
16 months, so he was a bubba. And the first phone call was of high concern. By the time I got off the mine site and made a second call, which was in a time frame of under 10 minutes, the call that we had showed me the level of fear and scared of what my wife Holly was going through, because the rapid change of the situation was just so dramatic. And then to turn up at a hospital, 30 minutes later, and walk into a scene that we did, literally changed our lives. We didn't know what the problem was, what had actually happened, and then to go through the process of actually finding out that it was a product that
It was egg.
And Holly loves eggs, she eats them most days. So when we actually found out it was egg, I just didn't believe it. It was just foreign. It could not cause the reaction that I saw that day. From then, like any other parent that goes through this, we looked at the hows and whys, tried to get up to speed, did research. The internet's very good that you can find information.
And we eliminated eggs straight away from all diets.
It must
and
have been
everything.
hard if you're a big egg eater.
Yeah, and you're on a mindset that we didn't think about this before, and now you have to think about every food that we fed Jack at the time. We only had the one child, was literally what is in that product, so you're on a very big information curve of understanding everything that you're feeding your child. And from there, we had our second child, Pearl. She had allergies as well, and then we had our third child, Riley. So by the time Riley, and we figured out that he had allergies, our three children had a scale of allergies that I didn't believe existed.
And people around you probably were questioning it as well,
We got a big trifecta.
Yeah, many people couldn't believe that, the foods that we eat so easily can cause reactions on the level that they have.
By the time Riley was born, or when he was about 6 months old, we figured out that he was between the three of them, it was anaphylaxis and allergies to egg, dairy, all tree nuts, sesame seeds, soy. Yep.
We found that out last year.
Yeah, that's an animal. That's like a different sort of allergy.
So as a family, it would have just changed the way you live, your shopping habits.
Oh, we didn't have any of those. None of those products in the house. Egg, dairy, soy, nuts.
Sesame?
No sesame.
We had minimum. For Riley was the only one who had dairy, and
Or dairy allergy, yeah.
We managed, the types of foods that we could feed our children. But once we found out with dairy was a game changer, and that probably took away 40% of what we could feed instantly. And that's when, I'll be honest, that I struggled, because the burden and mental health side of it just went to a level of, you're walking around in summer and you're just seeing ice cream wrappers, paddle pops, dairy is just a really hard one. And it took it to a level of, wow, is there anything out there that can help us? And that's where we sought the best help that we could, and the barriers that were put up was we don't know how to deal with this level of allergies. There's just so many of them in Australia, and our kids seem to have most of the really bad ones that, I struggled, Holly struggled, but between us, we kept on, defending our children and feeding them the best that we could. And because of the internet, we were so lucky that we had the opportunity to find out this information about Dr. Jones in Utah. And within probably, I think, 24 hours, Holly processed the information and she said, "Here, let's sit down, let's have a look at this." We had no choice. We had to find a way to make it happen, and everyone made it happen.
And living in a regional area, initially I would assume it was very difficult to access specialist services in terms of in the field of allergy.
Big time. We had, the specialists that we needed to see were down at Westmead in Sydney in New South Wales, and that's a 4-hour drive. Then not only that, because the level of the allergies means that we need to see some of the best in the country equals the financial cost. And going down there and having the pinprick test where, you're pushing your children's immunity to see where the allergies kick in. And that's something that I don't really want any parent to have to go through, just due to the fact of you're hurting your children, to see what actually the level is that they can withstand with the financial cost. And then at the end of it, we kept on coming home with just another food group that we can't have in our house or can't have near the children. There was actually no hope for us as a family of how do we combat this? How do we try and beat this?
Just EpiPens.
Yeah, this EpiPens. We'll show you the EpiPens that we have in our house. I've given an EpiPen, and that's something I never want to do again. The process that we went through was really hard, but.
Did someone help you psychologically in those moments? Because you would feel probably isolated as parents. Did you have support from your immediate family?
Yes.
Yeah, we
friends,
had good support from them, but it's something that it's foreign. Like, how do we deal with this? And then how do we have friends who support us who have no idea about the everyday situation? We're pretty lucky that we live away from the town, which then equals that we could protect our children. This is our castle. But they have to go to school. They have to live their life. Everyone goes to the shopping centre once a week to buy food. We have to take our children into that venue, which has everything that could potentially really hurt them. And the amount of stress that you go through to mentally prepare to be able to walk in there, to clean the trolley, to clean everything. Like, it gets to a point where I just hope that everything's clean enough. And then, as a parent, particularly for the mother, Holly fed the kids. So when we found out that there was a reaction, as a mother particularly, to think, wow, I cooked that. What did I do wrong? How did it go from just being a beautiful meal to all of a sudden now we're in hospital? The challenges that we had were, can we do 7 days without being in a hospital?
Wow. So the local doctors would, I guess, know your family perhaps in the local hospital.
Yeah,
even if it wasn't a reaction that needed hospital, I think between all 3 kids, there would have been hundreds of just reactions. Some of them very minor, others not. But just reacting to foods all the time.
And because we'd seen the potential and the timeline of the initial start of the reaction to the level that it could go to so quick, and living 30 minutes from the local hospital equaled that every time we saw the reaction start was literally, we have to believe that it has the potential to go to the extreme every time. So sometimes we'd drive to the hospital
and it'd be fine.
And it'd be fine, we'll get there. The medicines that we had at the time, the antihistamines, would do enough. But the problem is, every time it happened, we had to treat it like it was life-threatening. And that in itself, as a parent, is a lot of pressure, and a lot of mental health issues come about that, where I don't know if your friends or family can really understand the never ending, and it's never ending. The only time that they're safe is when they're asleep, because it just doesn't stop. Anytime they can touch something or come in contact.
Yeah, Riley was so allergic, I think particularly to dairy, that just going down a slippery dip that another child had been on, that had obviously probably consumed dairy like most kids do. We come out in welts and hives just from the contact of the slippery dip or the table. Just sitting at a public place was just a risk.
A risk. And even for me, there was a classic example I remember is that on the way home, being a miner, I do long hours, and I was just after a bit of sugar from the mine site to get home, and I just had a little bit of chocolate, and I came in, and the youngest ran up to me and he's like, "Give me a kiss," and I gave him a kiss, and I hadn't got more than 5 metres in the house, and Holly's just like, "Something's happening, hang on," and it took me like 5 minutes to because we're racking our brains. He hasn't touched anything, nothing's changed, we haven't done anything, and then I'm like, I can't believe I did it. 10 minutes ago I just had chocolate.
It was a kiss.
And it was just a kiss. Next minute we're on our way to the hospital. So to go through that process and find out that the challenges that we're having in Australia, to then see that there was, just a glimmer of hope, an option.
A treatment.
Yeah, in another country was just amazing. We heard that there was, I think it was like 750 kids had been through the clinic by the time we were committed to it. So we were very confident that if 750 other families had put their children through the treatment at that stage, it was worth a try.
But it meant that Holly needs to go by herself, and you have to support her from over here. How was that separation of the family handled by the
It was
family?
hard, it was challenging, but at the time for me, being in Utah doing the treatment with the 3 kids, and we had, COVID happened 2 months into the treatment too in America, so that was also a bit tricky. But for me, all I could think about in my head was just that, this is hard, but nothing's as hard as what we were doing before. We're all very committed to just, we've got to do this, we've got to do this. COVID didn't sort of scare us too much at the time.
Incredible in those days when the world was locking down, and you were seeking.
That COVID wasn't hard for us. Like that was the thing which I found at work. My work colleagues got to see me, having video phone calls at 3 a.m, because that's when our children were doing the
challenges.
The challenges.
Or the updosing,
and they were interested in the journey, so I'd be telling them about that, and then COVID kicked in, and they're like, "Wow, this is sort of like what you guys go through," and I'm like, it's close to what we go through, but the potential for what we were going through at that time was maybe 5, 6, 7 years, and it didn't stop in that 5 to 6, 7 years. Was unrelenting. So for me, I did the best I could being on the other side of the world, but for Holly just to be able to focus and go, everything is worth it, no matter how hard it is, because before we had that opportunity, it was just beyond hard.
The children did not even go to childcare?
No. And actually, if we didn't do OIT, I think particularly for Riley, because we treated egg, dairy, soy, and peanut. No, but that was you. Those 4 things for Riley. I just don't think we could have sent him to school being anaphylactic to egg, dairy, soy, and peanut, particularly the dairy and the egg, because dairy, as you know, is just in everything, every kid's lunchbox, and
same with family.
But when we got back from America, though, he hadn't actually finished the treatment. Pearl and Jack finished in Utah, but with Riley, we took it a bit slower. But by the time we got back to Australia, when we got back, because went back to the work for the first time in many years because I, just couldn't work. Obviously beforehand with, the allergies, and Riley couldn't go to daycare before OIT.
Isn't it 10 to 11 years?
Yes.
Pretty much. So you've got that mental health issue of being the parent, of trying to manage and maintain, a really good balance, but then you've got the financial burden of one of us had to commit to literally dedication to the children to be able to just try and get them through school. And it not only impacts us as a family, but then it impacts the school, because all of a sudden we're bringing children in, we're like, I'm sorry, you can't have that in your class. And to get other families to, but my child loves peanut butter, or these are the things which people just don't have the information on, and the repercussions of what actually can play out. So you've got these things which are there for all of us, but America was probably the easiest part because there was hope. We didn't have hope before, it was just maintain that balance. Once we committed to America, I think we had my parents allowed on our property for the last probably 14 months, because we're at a point where every time someone came here they might accidentally bring something, or that we didn't want to put that burden on them, that they didn't wash their hands enough, or they might have had something before they just turned up. So to remove that burden off them, we just said, sorry, we don't want people to come here, which is
self-isolating, like.
Yeah, it's our safe zone. That was how hard it got at the end, to then go to America, where it's like the results that we were seeing very quickly were just amazing. I just didn't believe that it could happen that quick, and then to see the end result over that time, like, we hope that we did it at an age where the kids don't remember when they had allergies. That was really key for us. We didn't want to perpetuate it so they'd remember that time. And we think that we've achieved that, but particularly for America, I think that they saw that there was relief. It wasn't easy for them, but they knew that there was hope and there was success really happening. Jack finished first. And to be able to then have things that he knew he couldn't have, and then to have Pearl have things that she couldn't have.
And now she's made these amazing muffins with dairy.
Yeah,
and
egg.
you're making it yourself with dairy and egg. How does it feel now, having this full freedom, Pearl?
Really good.
Yeah.
Love cracking eggs now, don't you? It's her favourite thing when cooking, because she couldn't obviously touch them before. But yeah, now she's the
master chef in the house.
The chef, and something which is so common to everyone, equals that Riley, for his 6th birthday, that he
got to have ice cream.
got to have real dairy ice cream for the first time. He had an ice cream cake
for his birthday.
It doesn't seem like much, but to be able to now just let the children look at a menu and go, can I have that? And it's not like what's in it, it's more like what's that flavour like, what's it taste like, what's it compared to. Before it was like we actually found what we considered safe food outlets or takeaways in our local area, where we go in and explain to people, hey, can you just tell us the ingredients before we buy anything? And most people were really good. Some people were, why do we have to do that? But we actually found some people that went out of their way to give us just a normal life for maybe 20 minutes once a week. That's how, I don't know, conservative or restrained that we had to be in the public arena. Kids couldn't play team sports. Just being at school was enough of a challenge. So I think for the trip to America, that was the easy part.
What about the actual oral immunotherapy, Holly? How was that for you as a mum with 3 children by yourself in the United States? You had to do this program on a daily basis. How challenging was that?
It was challenging, but again, just going back to nothing was as challenging as, before doing OIT and how unsafe we felt. Obviously, OIT was very monitored, and it was, done in a medical centre, and We updose once a week, so Jack did cashew and egg, Pearl did
Egg, sesame, peanuts.
and Riley did dairy, soy, peanut and egg. When we first got to America and met Dr. Jones, we did a lot of food challenges, and then we started
Was it inside the hospital or inside the clinic?
inside the clinic, yeah. Then we started OIT and we'd go weekly to the clinic to updose. And we basically updosed weekly until they completed, and then when we finished they can all eat those foods that they did OIT for in unlimited amounts. Obviously previously just a crumb of that food or a minute amount was life-threatening, and now they can eat all those foods in unlimited quantities.
And you mentioned there was an organization which made it more possible for you to get to America. How did that fundraising go? How did you organize it? Because for many Australian families, going to America would be unimaginable distance-wise and cost-wise, but it's amazing to hear that there are organizations which support Australian families.
For us, so both our parents had committed X amount. From there we realised that the journey, particularly for three of us, would cost a lot more than that.
So to relocate, rent a unit, buy a car.
Just to be able to live in another country for a year meant that we had a good think about it, and then we have a very unbelievable community around us who knew our story. To be in a rural part of Australia, community is everything, and people knew our story that our children can't come and play like the other kids. We can't go to the family, to the local pub and have dinners there for, they have a locals night. We just can't do that, or we couldn't do that. So everyone knew our story, and once they found out about this option for America, the local publican, he said, right, okay, let's do some fundraising. That's what we do here. So he was just a genius at that, and he put together some really good people, and between them over the period of time we had, I can't remember the lead-in time to go into America, might have been like 9 months or a year.
About a year, I think.
Raised a phenomenal amount of money in the community, which is
and
amazing.
GoFundMe as well.
Yeah.
Sister started a GoFundMe.
So it was a community effort.
Yeah. And then we also got this big donation from a charity in Melbourne too.
That was the publican. He's like, when we had the serious discussion about how much it would cost, he knew that would be short. And so he worked his magic and got onto the ABC show on Sunday mornings, which is Macca, and it goes all around Australia. And he talked about what was happening for us, and put it out there that any help would be good. A person that was driving a car from Brisbane back to Melbourne, he listened to this whole story. We were very lucky that he was only about 2 hours drive away from our area, and literally stopped, figured out where we lived and who this person was, made a phone call, and then literally drove over and spoke to him. And in that, he was the what's the word called, not benefactor, it's the person that deals with other people's wills when there's no siblings or children, but he was the executor of the will. And in the end of that, there was a donation over 100,000, which literally meant that we got to keep our house. That was what that gift did to us, because we're up to the point, the only way we can get this over the line is we'll probably have to sell our house.
The local Lions Club managed that money.
This is an incredible story. So this was, in a way, God sent or destiny sent.
Yeah,
literally.
and it's not just, a one person or a one team or a one family that can do this. It's a community. It's more than just one, and that's the thing which we just are indebted for the rest of our life to our community, because they've given our children the opportunity to be the same as everyone else in the community, and that wouldn't have happened. We couldn't have done that. without that help, our parents, for both of us, would have sold everything they could, and it still would have been a really big challenge. But to have that, I just didn't believe it at first. Like, that just doesn't happen.
And what about the doctors? So before you went to America, like every other food allergy family in Australia, you were told avoid, avoid, avoid. And then you come back from America and the children can live and experience food freedom. What was the reaction by some of the doctors? Was it a disbelief or excitement? Or what kind of reactions did you encounter with familiar doctors that you had to deal with before?
Oh, for familiar doctors, very, pleased or happy, I guess. But yeah, they probably didn't sort of go too much into it. But yeah, very impressed and happy.
What I found incredible is that your story was shared on ABC News, and that's how many families, including my own family, found out about this program. So you really are the beacon of light which shines through the world and notifies others that this hope is possible. And I won't probably ask too many other questions, but what about other Australians that you encountered in Utah? How was that? Was there a lot of support from that community as well?
Like family, they became like family. There were other families, Aussie families, that went through the treatment with us at the same time, and they're like family now.
And Dr. Jones.
And of course, and Dr. Jones. And they all had, success as well with their food allergy treatment. So
everyone succeeded, and that's what's just amazing about it is, the hope that we had before we found out about this was there wasn't hope.
It was just EpiPens. It was, here's an EpiPen, and if if your kids have a life-threatening food reaction, use the EpiPen. But that is really to buy you enough time to get to a hospital. It's not changing for the better of actually, can we figure a way to make the child's life actually normal? And that was just the tragedy of it before. Like when we first started talking about going to America, people just didn't believe that it could happen and you wouldn't be successful. And
there was a negativity around it.
Well, because it wasn't approved in Australia. Like, there's no, I'm not sure why it isn't, and that's something way above me, but the evidence is very clear. That's just the reality of it. The evidence is very clear. Any family that goes through any of the situations that we've been through need to know that there is hope. And overall, I think it's very easy. It's not easy to do, but considering what you have to put up with before doing the OIT treatment, it's nothing. If it's such a short term, hard pressure on the family or on the children, you won't remember it. It goes for less than a year. We were there for 50
11
weeks.
Months.
Yeah, 11 months. That's such a small part of a child's life to then come back and now we can do whatever we want. We can have an ice cream when we want. We can make cupcakes. We can go to sporting events where there's a sausage sizzle. The
Not
boys.
have to worry if there's been eggs. You just have to ask, is there an egg being cooked on this barbecue recently, or anything with dairy, or it was just easier to avoid. It was safer to avoid those sorts of things.
I think a big thing for a child is birthday parties. Like, every birthday party that our children went to, we had to bake a cake, have their own treats, and they would take that to that party. And knowing that over in that room or in that corner is all these foods that every other child is having, and going by the reaction of the child, they're very yummy, very tasty and awesome, and they can't have them. So we're only talking about the parents. For the children, they know that they're different. Through no fault of their own, it's not something that visually you can see. And when someone says, well, I'm eating a peanut butter sandwich, what's the matter with you? The child who's saying that doesn't actually understand what will happen to the child. So it's not just the parents or the families that we really need to be concerned about. It's the actual children. They've got to deal with it themselves every day, day in, day out. And I'm very sure that they know what happens when a reaction starts. So for our kids, we don't even really talk about reactions anymore. It's more, can we have an ice cream or a milkshake or all these things.
Yeah.
Pizza.
Last night we had a milkshake.
Everything that was bad.
Everything that was bad, and they knew it was bad. Like it got to the point where they were questioning us, what's in it. But that's how often we had to go through this process. They were questioning, Mum, I haven't seen that one. You haven't fed that to me before. I haven't had that before. Can you just run that through me again so I know that it doesn't have it?
And how old were they at that point?
Oh, easily, I reckon Jack would have been on that one at 6, maybe even 5. Like it was
Psychologically, was almost
because Jack being the oldest, he really got to see how Pearl and Riley played it out. So he was older, so he was trying to protect them as well. So he's asking the questions just to reaffirm that, hang on, it's all good.
And what's in it for the future? What's your hope for the future? For your family and for other families?
Oh, for other families, for other allergy families to be able to do oral immunotherapy like our kids did, and to be able to, have food allergy freedom and be safe around food. And, obviously there's the whole life-threatening side of food allergies, of course, but there's also the, the isolating side. And I'd love for other food allergy families to be able to have what our kids and our family have now, and to be able to eat those foods that were once life-threatening.
We have our hope.
And bring it together.
We have our hope. We start again. We have the normal life.
We've still got some food allergies with Riley, but compared with the scale of what we went to America with, we've still got allergies to sesame and cashew and prawn and a few other things possibly. No.
But we just didn't think it would stop.
Yeah, but that's, to have only 3 known food allergies at the moment compared to
what it was before.
In the double digits before, that's, very much more manageable, but yeah.
And we have our hope.
And you mentioned the employment aspect in the future.
Holly's back at work, successful. We now are financially in a very better position than when we were, when we first started our family. And everyone knows the pressure that every family has these days, where you need 2 incomes to be able to just maintain a good standard. We didn't have that option. It's in phases, you just make do. But I think the key out of doing interviews like this is for the families that don't, see light at the end of the tunnel, and we didn't see it for a long time, is that miracles do happen, and it's proven, it's real, it works, and
it's just food. It's just food that they use, that that the OIT is. It's not medicine as such. They were with each allergen or each food that the children did OIT for. They started with a minute amount of the allergen, and it was just built up and up and up every week until they could tolerate the food. So it's not medicine or anything. It's just food.
And you're treating Dr. Douglas Jones. What message do you have for him now?
Thank you.
A big thank you. He's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
His probably psychological skills in managing parental anxieties would have also come into play, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He understands obviously all the different areas of food allergy, and obviously but not just the medical sort of side of it, and how debilitating it can be for people. But Dr. Jones is our hope. He's amazing. We wouldn't be like we are now if it wasn't for him.
We're indebted to our community, but to have a person in our life who's dedicated his life to, fight the battle to beat allergies on the scale that he has. We're not the first family. I'm not sure the numbers that he's up to now, but he's changed so many families around the world with his treatment process for OIT that you only need one person. You just need the people behind him to support and believe in the idea that the evidence is there. We've got this. We've got relief. We've got hope. We've got it in spades. It's awesome.
Thank you for sharing the story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. maybe we'll just relax and ask, what's your favorite part of being able to live life how you like?
Playing more soccer with that.
And that's because it's a team sport. And so like today at soccer, they have a barbecue. The ability to be amongst other people, and it's just the normal things. It's actually really hard to comprehend how many things we had to remove ourselves from because of the potential, and particularly with 3 children, it's 3 times everything, because if one of them needs to go to hospital, we're all going to hospital. It's not just, okay, that person can go and we can manage it. It's all 3 of us going. So for Jack to be able to play soccer today it's just awesome. All of them now have a choice. Before it was, sorry, we can't do that. Or if it's an individual thing, yeah, we'll manage it. But now it's like, well, what would you like to do? Pearl's doing ballet and gymnastics and dance.
Acting.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
That's so
recitals, and it's just all these community involved things. Whether it's a team or a group. Now it's whatever you want to do, let's do it. Where before, we're lucky that they were young enough that there weren't a lot of opportunities. But the key thing that we keep talking about is if you don't have this treatment, the child will keep getting older and older with all these things, because the older you get, the more opportunities in life you get where they won't be able to do it. So, that's probably the best thing about it, is the ability to do whatever we want.
Cool.
You got a question, Pearl? You got a question for Pearl?
I do.
Oh, yeah. Okay, do you want to tell your little story? So you talk to Nina.
At all the birthday parties I've been to, if we didn't know if I could have dairy, and a few minutes later I could be died.
Yeah.
Killed of all the allergies there were in that cake, like dairy and little leaves and sesame on top.
And it wouldn't take much, and it's even if there's a crumb there or anything, we had to be so careful and have an EpiPen ready because we weren't sure.
And now you have tasted the chocolate.
You want to say how good ice cream is, Riley?
Chocolate! Yeah,
Okay.
last
So last night we had one of Daddy's milkshakes.
Wow.
Yeah, it tastes good. From the last stuff ice cream, he said that you can make it better, so that you can't even use a straw because of
How thick it is.
Yeah, how thick it is.
You get a spoon instead of a straw because it's got that much dairy in it.
Wow.
So
it's unlimited dairy.
It's unlimited dairy. Like literally,
so
like
40% of food back in the diet.
Well, it's pretty much all there, and the things which we've got to still watch out for, they don't have anyway. The things that we have fixed and treated are the things that you need nearly every day, and it's nutritional. These are nutritional things which they couldn't have. So how did that affect them? We're only still learning and studying that, but the key for anyone is information in the internet is the thing how people need to know that there is hope. We wouldn't have noticed any of this, we wouldn't have had this life or had this interview if it wasn't for the internet. And did the research, even when people said, oh, it's unsure, it's very expensive and it's not guaranteed. We had the ability to research enough to give us the end result that we've got nothing to lose. And hopefully after this interview, anyone who watches it, you've got hope.
We do.
For your children and for your life going forward, because it's worth the effort. That's for sure. And Dr. Jones, you're a champion.
We also can put goats to bed. Look, it's getting dark.
Well, we can do the goats in a second.
And now you could also feed the goats with dairy as a family.
Yeah.
I don't think we all like dairy, but they do really like lids. I think we're vegan.
And another thing is taking on, and this is true, so when we talk about pets add an extra burden to a family. So we didn't want to add any extra burden when we already were maxed out with the allergies. So now we have, we can think about this. We haven't had a family holiday for 6 years because we just couldn't go anywhere where we would relax. We're actually thinking about having our first family holiday, which is just something that I can't believe because it shouldn't have happened. But now we have that option. Just to have an option that's the relief. And that's the hope, where you just start slowly shutting down every option where you've got the potential. So I think for us, it's more people need to know about it. It works. Dr. Jones, we can keep talking about this treatment. Like I'll keep talking until we have to stop. But it works. Why can't everyone have the ability to seek this treatment out? In Australia, instead of travelling to America, we were very lucky that we had the support, but not everyone has that ability. And that's where I just sit there and go, Australia's the best country in the world. We've got the best food in the world. We should be able to do it here. We shouldn't force families to go through that burden of going to America when there's already that clinic is already packed, booked out, etc. There's that many people that need it. We can do it here.
Thank you. We're going to go.
I would like to introduce Dr. Douglas Jones, who is joining us from the United States of America. He is a board-certified allergist and immunologist. He has helped more than 30 Australian families overcome life-threatening food allergies and counting. So I will pass the floor on to him.
First of all, thank you everyone for coming. This is amazing. It's a wonderful event. Thank you, Nina, for organizing, and also Dr. Julian for being so kind and generous and hosting it at the Kite Center. I have to say I had the opportunity of visiting the Kite Center a few months ago, and what a beautiful location. I mean, the area that it's in with the tennis courts and all the beauty, it's quite an impressive facility there, and Dr. Julian needs to be proud of that. I'm so thankful for what everyone's shared so far, and I didn't actually know what they were going to share, but it feeds right into exactly the message that I want to give today, and I'm excited about it. So a few months ago, had the opportunity of meeting with the Speaker of the House of Australia, and thank you to Nina, and also a very passionate mom who I think is in the audience, either physically or online. Very appreciative to their relentless efforts to make that meeting happen. And it was a wonderful opportunity to visit Canberra and just feel of Australia a little bit more. In that meeting, I was so impressed with him, and he asked a very pointed question to me, and he said, "What's your why?" And I want to start today by telling you what my why is, because I think that's really so key in anything that we do, is to understand, why are we doing what we're doing? So about 15 years ago, I finished my training in allergy and immunology. Had started my own practice and was treating, food, or seeing a lot of food allergy families. And at that time, 15 years ago, the world was a bit different. And so many families would come in, we'd test them, we'd give them the same spiel of, you have to avoid and have your epinephrine injector and hope that nothing bad happens, really. And there was one family in particular who I started seeing their son, and he had allergies to peanuts and tree nuts. And so they had to avoid, all of those things, and were nervous. And a couple of years later, they brought their 11-month-old daughter in, and she had just had a drop of milk spill on her and had diffuse hives and wheezing and short of breath. And it was right before her birthday, and mom was terrified because she said, we were going to give her some birthday cake. And she said, "I hope it's just milk," because her brother Ethan had peanuts and tree nuts, and now to the family, they were going to add milk. And she said, "I hope it's just that." Turns out the younger sister, Emma, had milk, eggs, wheat, peanut, and tree nuts. And I very vividly remember going in and having to talk to this family. And with what was on their table as a family unit of what they had to avoid, The parents got tears in their eyes, and the mom looks at me and she says, "What do I feed my daughter?" And I had this sick feeling in my stomach, and I just said, "I have no idea." And we sat for a minute and chatted, and it was kind of a very real moment. And it struck me so many times, allergists in particular, it can often be so robotic or easy to just say, "Oh, here's your test. This is what you have to avoid." They're out the door. You're on to the next patient. But really, that news that was just delivered changed their whole life. It changed everything. Every minute of every day, it changed. And it was kind of that moment that really hit me what news I was just giving to them. I was a new doc. I didn't have much experience at that time. And so I had that moment with the family, and we just sat and chatted and embraced and created a plan. But I went back in my office and I just put my head down, and I just thought, I've got to do something more. They deserve better. I need to be better, for them. I have to work harder. I've got to find something. And so that set me on a path to give a better answer and a better solution to food allergy families. And that's where it started. For so long, I think food allergy families have felt unheard. They haven't been given a hope or a choice, and really have felt to be prisoners to what they've been diagnosed with, or trapped. There's a lot of fear. And my why, through that experience and through now, fast forward 15 years later of treating thousands of food allergy families, my why is to hear the unheard, to give hope, choice, and more freedom to those who feel trapped, to dispel fear by solid evidence and good education, and also to keep pushing the envelope, to keep pushing, and to not just follow a standard, but to set the standard and be the standard. So with that, I've had the opportunity of co-founding a few organizations, one called the Global Food Therapy, another called the Food Allergy Support Team, which is a nonprofit organization. And then I'm part of a group in Australia called the Immunity Group of Australia. And each of these organizations is dedicated to helping and serving either families or clinicians, doctors, heavily involved in education and trying to forward the work for, helping more food allergy families. Why is there such a need? I want you to think about a few things. So let's compare food allergy with something the whole world has just experienced, which was the global pandemic with COVID. Why did the pandemic occur? I'm not asking about political positions or theories about where the virus came from. Not interested in that argument in this discussion. What was it about the virus that drove the world to the measures that were taken? What was it? Well, initially, it was largely unknown and not understood. It's potentially life-threatening, and the exposures could be unpredictable. Does this sound familiar to those of you that have lived a food allergy life? Potentially life-threatening, unpredictable, a lot of unknowns, or perhaps not understood. You live that life every day. But the world, when they were faced with something like that, how did they react to something that they didn't understand, that was all of a sudden potentially life-threatening to them and unpredictable? If you had to sum it up, just think about that in a minute. All the measures that were taking place, and I know firsthand a lot of the draconian measures that were taken in Australia, for instance, surrounding the pandemic. If you had to sum it up in one word, as I kind of thought about this, I thought of several words, but one 4-letter F word actually kept coming to my mind. And that one is fear. People were generally fearful of what may happen. And there were larger organizations, and the media played on that fear. Fear sells. Fear enables control. For instance, a lot of the mandates that in situations that usually are not acceptable, at that moment, people all of a sudden kind of fell in line and made it acceptable. When there's fear, there was less empowerment and choice. There was fear about the virus. There was fear about the treatments that were offered. And people hammered on that fear. I would sit in hotel quarantine for 2 weeks in, the Australian hotels, and I'd watch the media every single day over and over and over again harp about, this fear-based message. And it blew me away because, like, I'm an immunologist. It's like I understood this far better than, a majority of the population, but this fear-based message, what measures were employed because of this? Isolations. There were times where people had to miss family events, important events, social events. There were distancings. There were travel restrictions. It created financial hardships. Does this sound familiar to a food allergy family? Have you ever had to isolate? Have you ever had to make travel arrangements? Has it ever imposed financial hardships? The reason I'm saying this is a lot of times with food allergy families, I don't think there's an appreciation of the burden that's on their shoulders until that burden is lifted. And in treating so many families for so many times, that's probably the single thing that has been most impressive to me, is seeing that burden lifted and seeing what people are capable of once that burden is gone. And when, we were in the pandemic and all of these restrictions are imposed on the world, they were kind of living the life. We all kind of lived the life that food allergy families had to live. And through all of that, people were kind of losing some rational thought. And at the same time, what did people desire the most? What did you hear the most from people? They wanted to get back to a sense of normalcy. In a food allergy family or community, that's what I hear a lot. They want hope. They want some choice. They want that ability to kind of get back to a sense of normalcy. They don't want to have to, sit at a special table or make special arrangements as they travel or live in fear, every single day. So we want to go from fear to normalcy. How does this apply to food allergy? What measures can we employ? I say let's band together. If you're in an airplane high above, you may be scared to death to jump. But if you can grab onto a trusted source, a trusted guide, you can grab on and you can band together and you can spread out on the journey, makes it more doable. And something that I've told my patients for a decade is, let's be prepared, not scared. Let's band together and let's dive in and let's kind of gain a little higher perspective of this. So what's the problem? 1 in 13 children have food allergy. It costs over $4,000 US, which I did a calculation on today's exchange rate. I think it's about 6,000 Australia dollars per person per year for food allergy and all the extra accommodations that have to occur. So there's a significant financial burden. 40% of children with food allergy report being bullied in school. There can be nutrition and caloric deficits due to restricted diets. Sometimes these children are unnecessarily avoiding because of over-testing, misinterpretation of the tests, or fear. And there's not enough resources in the medical community to properly administer a food challenge. Food allergy is actually not just a child's issue anymore, though. 1 in 10 adults have food allergy, over 51% of those reporting a severe reaction, and almost half reporting their allergy started in adulthood. I saw one just today in clinic. 1 in 20 believe they have food allergy, even though it's 1 in 10. Why is that? There's a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, misdirection. Again, I'm going to go back to the pandemic. There was so much misinformation, misunderstanding, and misdirection. It made it very difficult for those that were in the trenches trying to live and treat this. It's very similar with food allergy. So why have food allergy statistics skyrocketed? Why have they tripled? There's a lot of theories, and I'm going to break it down to a number of them. Primarily, a lot of the theories come down to a disruption of the microbiome on the skin, the gut, and the lungs. There's something called a hygiene hypothesis, where we were too clean and our immunity doesn't develop properly. And so it plays a role in the microbiome on our skin, gut, and lungs. A lot of things that can play into disruption of the microbiome are C-sections, early use of antibiotics, antacids, things like Nurofen, those types of medications. Stress can play a role. Rosie gave a wonderful presentation on kind of that bi-directional situation between allergy and anxiety. And diet, these can all be kind of disruptors of the microbiome. Disruption on the skin microbiome and genetics play a large role in eczema, which has a significant impact on food allergy. Vitamin D deficiency plays a role. This is a big deal in Australia, especially for those in the southern part of Australia, because you're farther away from the equator. And also something that Dr. Julian brought up. He brought up kind of the early, the study from 2017 of the Australian group that kind of proposed some early food introduction guidelines to Australians. That stemmed from actually a 2015 study that was a landmark study done, where it showed that we, meaning the medical community, for years and years and years, have been giving bad recommendations. Societies all across the societies of allergy and pediatrics all across the world were giving very bad recommendations for a very long time. And it turns out when somebody actually challenged that, turns out it was better if we feed some of these allergens early instead of the avoidance. So that's also kind of created part of the problem. So what are some solutions to kind of get back to normalcy? Some still advocate as a standard of care, strict avoidance, the epinephrine injectors at all times, and hope. And perhaps in some situations, that's all we can do. In fact, as I work globally, there's not just in developed countries, but in a lot of countries, they don't even have epinephrine available. And that drives fear even more. But how has this type of strategy or solution worked out? There's risk, there's cost. As we talked, there are about 6,000 Australian dollars per year per family, per year, per child. There's a lot of collateral damage, as we discussed, as has been presented, with anxiety and stress. I think, my opinion, this is kind of unacceptable in developed countries now. There are more active treatments that are available. Does a treatment have to be perfect to be implemented? No, it does not. It has to be better than the current standard. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And one of the things that, when I started this 10 years ago, I had a lot of pushback. And in fact, allergists in my state wrote letters against me, saying, and they would hand it out to their patients in the waiting rooms. And it was something that I kind of had to overcome because they would say this wasn't a cure. And I would often think, you don't just withhold something because it's not perfect or it doesn't cure. What we want to do is understand the risks, the benefits, and kind of see what that ratio is and see how does that fit within a person. The reason as to why food allergy statistics have skyrocketed, by the way, is going to give us some insight into how we can get back to normalcy. And I'm going to get back to that towards the end of this presentation. But I want you to start thinking about the reasons I presented in terms of why the food allergy statistics have skyrocketed. What are some leading product candidates for food allergy treatment? there's actually vaccines being developed. One in particular is specific for peanut. Everyone starts with peanut, even though the other half of the food allergy population has other things, other food allergies. There's also an antibody that's being developed to block peanut specific, what we call IgE, or the peanut antibody. So there's like a blocking antibody being developed. There's various types of what we call immune modulators that can be given to patients. There's various types of immunotherapy. There's actually a toothpaste, and there's a couple of different types of patches that are actually being developed as potential products or leading candidates. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details on these in particular. They're in clinical trials, they're in development. I'm mainly just broadening the mind in terms of what's being investigated. But what can be done? So many times in food allergy, it's about what can't be done or what you can't do. I kind of like to think about what you can do. What can we do? What can be done? What is available? This actually varies globally. That little guy over there is my very first patient that I treated 10 years ago. I started this in June of 2013, and that's my very first guy there. So what can be done? Prevention measures, if there isn't any allergy, as Dr. Julian mentioned, and we've kind of talked about. There are actually some Chinese herbal formulations that would be available to patients. Oral immunotherapy is available. Oral immunotherapy with biologics or some kind of medication as adjunct treatments are available. There's also something called sublingual immunotherapy that is available. Globally, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles published on various forms of immunotherapy. We have recommendations and guidelines from the Spanish group, from Europe, from Canada, the United States. Down in some of these boxes, we've had several position papers on some best practices with oral immunotherapy. There's a whole food allergy journal dedicated to this in the United States. And this is kind of a table of contents. The reason I'm doing this is to show you globally there are hundreds and hundreds of articles and research that has been done for well over a decade in this field. There are, each one of these articles are summaries where the authors went in. I know this because I was a part of this group. We went in and we kind of took all the available literature and summarized what was available and put it into the article, which went into the journal. You can look at practical aspects of immunotherapy, optimal patient selection, considerations for decision-making, kind of a shared decision-making, risk factors, adverse events, adjunctive therapies, like I mentioned before, a focus on biologics, the role of dietitians, a practical focus. So you can see there's so much that has been done in the world over the last 10 years, actually 15, 20 years, but it's really boomed over the last decade in the world of what we can do and what may be available. This is kind of a summary of the various countries in the world and what their current approach is to perhaps immunotherapy. Australia currently is saying no to it. Canada, yes. You can see it's kind of offered by a significant portion of allergists and a small number doing SLIT. United Kingdom still on the fence. Italy, yes. Germany, yes. Singapore, no. Hong Kong, no. Japan, yes. So you kind of have this wave across the world, actually, of people that have said no for years and are finally kind of getting on, in terms of what they're offering and what they're recommending. Those are all guidelines. What I just shown you on this slide, these are all kind of what the guidelines say. When I think about guidelines, what do those kind of mean? They're average recommendations for an average doctor treating the average patient. Why is this the case? A lot of guidelines have to have some wiggle room because there's so much variability in patients and in people that you kind of have to have some wiggle room. They can't be so stringent that it really straps the doctor. And a lot of times, the clinical trials that are used to perhaps gain evidence to develop guidelines don't account for a lot of outliers or more complicated patients. In fact, research studies often exclude certain populations. In real life, we can't exclude people. We must help people. We must heal people. We must take care of the typical patient, but we also have to make room for the exclusions. I would actually make a bet that there are several in this audience that actually tried to get into a clinical trial at some point and were excluded for one reason or another. In the real world, we can't do that. We have to create space for those patients. So what to do? How do I now approach this? I've evolved my practice and my approach not only to food allergy patients, but actually to just people in general. There are protocols, there's products, but I never want to lose sight of a person and people. And while so many have their sights put on products and protocols, I'm telling you, after 10 years of doing this and treating thousands of people, that product and protocol is easy. It's literally the easy part. But that is where so much of the focus and energy goes, is to developing that. I'm not minimizing that. Those are important. Protocols and products are necessary. But in the grand scheme of it, that really is the easy part, because there's a range. There's a range by which you can do this. I've actually learned to focus more on the person, to try and take a more holistic approach, not only to the person, but also their surrounding community. Food allergy, while it's very much a physical manifestation and can be potentially life-threatening and unpredictable, is largely a social issue. I learned this from a good friend and colleague of mine. Her name's Fallon Schultz. She's actually she's in charge of a large international food allergy advocacy group. We were having some discussions about kind of our perception and how we approach food allergy, and it was very similar. But she actually said this is largely a social issue, and I quite agree. You have the acute situation where reactions can be life-threatening, but you also have chronic issues, the real life, day in, day out, quality of life issues. That dominates with food allergy. When you think about the pandemic, with COVID, those quality of life issues, day in, day out, the restrictions, the isolations, all of the mandates, all of those things dominated the quality of life. Those psychosocial issues where, the isolation leading to some depression, anxiety, bullying, sleep, poor sleep, all of those things play into this. These are chronic day in, day out issues that food allergy families have to live with. Finances are another issue, which we've talked about. Health and caloric restrictions. Even shopping for foods is a challenge. Restaurants, travel, hotel, all the things that you live. That, to me, these are all kind of social issues, quality of life issues that dominate the world of food allergy. Yes, the acute life-threatening situations get most of the press. Just like with the pandemic, it was always about number of infections and number of hospitalizations and number of positive tests. In food allergy, it's always about number of EpiPens used, number of ER visits, number of hospitalizations or whatever. What isn't talked about so much is this collateral damage of the day-to-day quality of life, where the rubber really meets the road of what you're living every single day. And the acute affects the chronic, and the chronic affects the acute in a bidirectional relationship. As Rosie mentioned before, that anxiety and allergy, I think that's where that bidirectional relationship comes into play. Not only in the allergy life, but in the treatment as well. When, remember when I said in the pandemic, a lot of times people wanted to get back to a sense of normalcy. And what has driven the rise in food allergy? And we talked about likely or largely microbiome disruptions in the skin, gut, and lungs. What contributes to that? Oftentimes we have to think about what is the quality of food? What is the context of the person as the food interacts with the person? So this is, if there's one thing you take from this message today, there is so much in when we looked at the potential treatments that are coming down the line, whether it's a peanut vaccine or a peanut, blocking antibody, or, a patch or a toothpaste or whatever it is, or even if you look at what's being kind of done globally, worldwide, with oral immunotherapy or sublingual immunotherapy, those are all so focused on product protocol. But really, what I'm saying is you have a food. Is it the food that's bad? No. Is the person bad? No. It is the context by which the food is going to interact with that person. And when I talk about that, it's like, what is that environment? What are the hormones? What's the nervous system doing? What is the immune system doing? What fuels each of those? For those of you who are familiar with food allergy tests, for instance, you will look at either a skin test or like a total IgE, like a specific IgE. And many of you have probably had these tests done. And let's say you had one person has a peanut IgE of 5, and another person has a peanut IgE of 10. And people like to compare these numbers. It's a number. It doesn't tell the whole story of the context of the person. And a lot of times people, and some people, it may actually be negative, but they're still reacting. Why? Because it's like one piece to the puzzle. It's one piece to the context of that person. And we really have to think about, when that food comes in and it's interacting in the context of the person, that matters. And when we're doing treatment of any kind, what happens, when that treatment is interacting with the context of that person, whether it be social, mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual stressors, or kind of what I like to call fitness. How is the overall health and well-being in all of those areas and what's interacting? When I see a patient, that's what I think about. I think about all of those types of things because that is more important, actually, than a product and a protocol. And so what I'm trying to do is what we've done in our clinic in Utah, in the United States, is develop a kind of program like this where we can take a more holistic approach to a person, and really think about how and what, as we're working with these patients and we're delivering food to this person, how can we change or better serve the context of that person when that food is received, for instance? That's a big deal. So we like to think, and in fact, so many times when we think about standardization of everyone wants a standardized set protocol and product. But the thing is, if we only focused on that, and what if the context of that person in that moment didn't fit that product? But if we change the context of the person or the context of where that's going, now it may work. So in the noise of kind of finding correct products and protocols, let's not miss the sweet music of the person. I like to say, let's meet people where they are and guide them to where they want to be, instead of being so strict and so stringent into fitting like perhaps a certain protocol. This is an approach that we've developed. This is something that we are currently working on in our clinic, and it's really resonating. In fact, I've been asked to give this presentation to a at allergy conferences in two places, one in the Middle East and one in Europe, in a few weeks. This is actually kind of where I think when we really kind of focus in on a person, we're going to get back to more of a sense of normalcy and really looking at people as people and not just as a number. And with that, I'm going to end. Thank you.
Wow, super impressive. This is fascinating to hear from one of the pioneers in OIT field globally. But before we can ask any questions, we would like to also hear from a food allergy mom from Melbourne. We have never met Zanella, but your energy is felt over here. She's an activist in the process of registering her own NGO and has been very active on social media this month. Of course, this is a National Allergy, Asthma Anaphylaxis Education Awareness Month. Over to you, Zanella.
Thank you so much, Nina, for inviting me to speak, to be in to share this platform with Dr. Jones and Dr. Julian and Dr. Jovanovic. It's really an honor for me. It's been a very long and difficult journey for us. So I haven't prepared anything. I am just going to speak about our experience and how did I get to this point where I am today. So I'll just share my screen. I just click on a share screen. Yeah, this one. Share. I think is that visible? Yeah. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, all good? Okay. So about a month ago, I had an epiphany, if you like, or I think I finally woke up after 20 years of living with food allergies. So to give you a bit of a background, I have two girls. They are 17 and 19 years old now. My eldest one had her first anaphylaxis when she was 3 months old. And as a new mom, first child, I had no idea what was happening. She lost consciousness. Well, clearly she's alive now, but like to this day, I have no idea how I got to the emergency room and they saved her, but I cannot recall. But that was the catalyst. That was the trigger for all the, like many speakers have mentioned, the anxiety, severe depression, and just fear. When my second daughter was born, I just knew from 3 months old, she had developed this rash on her skin. And I just knew that this will be a similar, she may have similar issues to my older one. So that has, shown to be true down the track. So over the years, it's been extremely difficult from the point of view of very little support. We've done everything, followed all the guidelines from the doctors. I mean, we were so in hospital, in and out of hospital so often that, you get to know people by their first names. So it's always been, I was always hopeful that there will be something, that we will have an option, that, something will happen. But here I am 20 years later, still waiting. And that's what has happened. I've finally woken up, and it's not okay to wait anymore. It's not okay that we in Australia don't have the options for our kids. It breaks my heart when I see the numbers increasing. The statistics showing that Australia is the #1 country in the world now per capita for food allergy incidents. Like one of the speakers mentioned, it's not even the adults now, out of the blue, they're developing allergies. So it's really, like Dr. Jones said, it is a pandemic. And I, as a mother, I also don't understand, why is it not spoken about more? Why is it not more widely discussed? And why is it why are we not doing more about this? I mean, I've been following the research, I've been reading the papers, doctors that we saw, they were in training over these past 20 years. They are now, researchers. And so in my mind is, okay, so research is fine. And like Dr. Jones said, there's a product. So they want to develop a product, and that's okay because we do need it. But you can't, one size does not fit all. And if there is something that we can do now, why is it not being done? So my mission and it all, like I said, it all happened in the past month. Like I actually broke my leg, and then I was in bed for 6 weeks. I couldn't move. I had this cast on, and everything it was like a perfect storm. As part of my therapy, clearly for all the depression, and I developed PTSD as well. I was writing in a journal, and I use. I'm also an artist, so I used my art to communicate my feelings. So I've written this poem, which just came out of me, which turned out to be actually a story of our life. So if you'd like to read it, on the screen you can see the website. The poem is there, published there on our About page. So that poem was everything that I felt for these past 20 years that I could not communicate with people. I never wanted, it was really hard even educating close family and friends. It took years for them to understand that even a little bit is an issue of the food that the girls could not have. I've always provided their cakes and their, for parties, so they wouldn't miss out. But it's not the same. Like we've never been out as a family to a restaurant to this day, and like they're 17 and 19. They both have multiple food allergies and anaphylaxis, and it's going to somebody. It's only recently that we've started at a cousin's house that the girls have started eating there. It's about the education and getting people to understand that cross-contamination is an issue, and it's that safety, because if you can't, as a parent, if you can't keep your child safe, it's I guess that's the number one thing. Something happening to your child, it's devastating. So with this poem and everything sort of emerged from me, and I guess the fighting spirit came out. And I've decided, so Give a Kiss of Life is what my initiative and advocacy is called. And when you read the poem, you will understand where the name comes from. It's got multiple layers there. So I want to get out there, and I want to start speaking. If I've been quiet for all these years, many parents will understand you don't want people to feel sorry for you. You don't want people to pity you. You just want understanding, and you just want to be included. And that's been the struggle all these years. But now I'm actually, maybe because I'm more mature, maybe because I no longer, I want to give my girls, if I couldn't give it to them all these years, now that they are older, and they are almost, not almost, but they are going out on their own, and I could no longer be there. Yes, I have educated them, but now it's on them to educate others. We can't just sit still, and we can't, at least I can't be complacent anymore, and be quiet about it. So I've hit the ground running. I've got a couple of engagements, one on this Sunday, and a few engagements at the local big shopping centre. So I'm going places, starting to speak, and I'll do these workshops and seminars, and we just need to start the conversations and involve people. All it takes is just asking. That's what I did. I just asked, and I started talking, and people are embracing it. So I'm really actually pleased that there's more support now than there was, 15, 20 years ago when my girls were little and I had absolutely no one. So being in a group like this with like-minded people, and those who know what we're going through, it actually has done a lot for me as well to start feeling better, not just mentally, but just there's hope. I can finally see that there's hope, and that if we all work together, we can bring change. Because I absolutely believe that every person has a right to access treatments that are available. And why we can't is something that I'm going to work on really hard to change that status quo. And yeah, so the more people I can bring on board, the better. So there'll be a series of workshops, and I'm planning to attack restaurants and workplaces and schools, targeting even. I know there's advocacy for younger children. I'll be targeting sort of high school age, because that's the age when they start taking more risks, and they may be, there's a dare from a friend. I mean, my girls have both been bullied in school, and they dare you to do something, and it's like, well, hello, that can potentially really harm me. So my focus will be on many different aspects of the social life, and like one of the speakers said, it is that's what it is. It's the social life and isolation that we felt all these years, and it's not okay, because we don't know what normal is. Going, if I have to prepare for 3 days in advance to go somewhere, that's really, at the end of the day, you don't even feel like going. So yeah, it's all happening. I'm really glad to be to finally be able to step out of the. I'm not saying that I'm cured. The depression and PTSD and anxiety. It's not. It's part of you. I'm still scared for my kids, which is normal for a parent. But I'm much better, in a much better place, and my head is in a much better place as far as food allergies goes, because I believe that I can make a change, and I can contribute to bring this to the forefront. And if I can improve somebody's life, and help another family or help another child, that they don't go through life like we had to, then it'll be all worth it. So yeah, any support is welcome. I'm starting out, but it's never too late. Yeah, so that's about it. I'm not sure what else to say, but yeah, I'm here, and for the long run.
You sound like a pro, I have to say. I mean, this is coming from the heart and the soul, and we look forward to meeting you in the future.
Yes, same here.
I will.
Thank you.
I will ask you if you don't mind stopping screen sharing. We have not too much time for questions. Let me see if we have any in the chat. I think there was one earlier.
Stop share.
Yes, so just to answer those audio issues we will address in the final video. There was a question from Diana to everyone, I'm not sure. Diana, can you type again? Who did you actually address the question to? It says, what does your formula for allergy treatment include in terms of OIT? Is it the allergen and a probiotic?
I think that was for Dr. Jones.
Probably for Dr. Jones, yeah. I'm not sure if Dr. Jones in here as well.
We've always, for 10 years, I've incorporated not only probiotics, but also something called prebiotics. And we also look at, vitamin D levels and a number of things that kind of feed into, better immunity, better tolerance, and just overall, helping kind of that gut health microbiome. And so that's, that's always been a part of what we do. And it's something we talk about. we don't force people to do that, but definitely part of what we talk about.
Thank you. There's a second question. Is there anything stopping allergists in Australia from offering food allergy slit if they wanted to? I'm not sure if that's for Dr. Julian and Dr. Jones, or both, perhaps.
I think Dr. Jones summed up a nice and adroit response to this, that there are protocols and policies, but they don't fit everybody. More importantly, there's sometimes either a misreading or perhaps a series of, as we talked earlier about, assumptions or misassumptions about what certain clinical individuals are capable of doing and not capable of doing. There's no doubt governance and auspice are important, but absolute patriarchal control is a different concept entirely.
So I don't think I'm qualified to speak about Australia allergists or the Australia politics, but I will share a story about what happened in the United States, because I've had this question for 10 years. I was probably one of the first 10 people to start OIT, and I got a lot of pushback, and I would be interviewed a lot on TV and by various places, and they would say, why aren't other allergists doing this? And there was a lot of reasons. I'm just speaking from my own experience, what happened in America. I don't know if it can be, translated to what's happened in Australia. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think I'm really qualified to speak on that. But what we faced there was just a lot of fear, a lot of unknown. And simply people wouldn't do a lot of things because perhaps they didn't have the time or the energy to devote to food allergy families. Many said they were waiting for an FDA approved product to come along. And really the interesting thing was, many of us use food as for treatment sources. And when an FDA approved product came along, it actually hasn't really been utilized very well in the United States. And in fact, their sales team is getting kind of disbanded because we've kind of realized that wasn't really the end all be all. It was far more than just kind of that stringent product and protocol. And so a lot of people were waiting for that, but even when it was approved, it really hasn't had kind of that uptake that a lot of people thought. There's a lot of reason that could be debated for a very long time, but that's just been our experience.
Thank you. Is there any question from the audience in person? Because we do have audience in person. Anyone would like to ask something?
I'd like to know how to get in touch with Dr. Jones.
Perhaps how to get in touch with Dr. Jones? Instagram?
Instagram.
Somebody asked here what the difference between OIT and SLIT is. That's a really good question. I'll just address that really quick. Nina, maybe you can put how they can get in contact with me there through the email, or Instagram. It's just Dr. Douglas Jones on Instagram, but SLIT stands for sublingual immunotherapy. So it's usually some drops that are put right under the tongue, and they're kind of held under the tongue for a period of time while it absorbs. Whereas OIT is oral. So you take the food and it's swallowed. There's differences from an immune standpoint in what's happening, because the immune system under the tongue is actually different than the immune system in the gut. So there's kind of different dosing. There's different certain cells that are getting activated in one versus the other. In general, SLIT is safer, less side effects. There's very, very few like anaphylactic type episodes with SLIT. The downside to SLIT is it perhaps isn't as effective. So there's kind of some trade-offs with oral immunotherapy. We see few more side effects, few more reactions, but it's also more effective in protection against, you know, accidental ingestions. But we can also get more people eating more freely the food that was once life-threatening to them. We are going to actually be piloting a protocol that is a hybrid. We're going to start this in the US shortly, but it's going to be a hybrid of SLIT and OIT. And it's going to be one where we enhance the safety and efficacy, but also enhance the safety, but also get the efficacy. So that's something that we're actually be piloting, is combining the two.
Thank you. We don't have much time for questions. Perhaps any final comments by the speakers? If there is anything anyone wants to say. The recording will be available not immediately. We have to combine all the cameras. Can we please thank every single speaker that actually volunteered their time for this? Let this be only one conversation during this month, but let's kind of join together, like Fenella said, and act more in a cohesive manner and transnationally. This is a transnational problem, and we need to think along those lines. Thank you, everyone, and see you. Yes, at the next event.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you.